You wake up, have your coffee, start the day as always. Maybe you're tired, but you think it's normal. Maybe you have a pain here, another there, but nothing serious enough to stop everything. You move on, because that's what you've always done. After all, life doesn't wait, right? But there's something you don't realize. And that, at this very moment, might be killing you. It's not the cigarette, it's not the food, it's not just genetics. It's something much more silent, much more intimate, much more treacherous. The weight of everything you feel and never let out. I'm not talking about any stress, like traffic or a long line. I'm talking about years, maybe decades, of swallowing anger to avoid hurting anyone, of smiling when you wanted to cry, of saying I'm fine when you were shattered inside, of putting everyone before yourself, hoping that this would make you more loved, more accepted, more secure. But the body doesn't work that way. It registers every time you stay silent, every time you erase yourself, every time you pretend you don't feel. And over time, this accumulation turns into something physical. It corrodes your defenses, confuses your immune system, leaves doors open for diseases that you think happen out of nowhere. Maybe you're already feeling the signs, that fatigue that doesn't go away, the unexplained pains that the doctor can't diagnose, the insomnia, the anxiety that arises out of nowhere, the feeling of always being on edge. You convince yourself that it's just stress, as if stress were something harmless. But Dr. Gabor Maté, after years of working with terminal patients, discovered something that most people, and doctors, don't want to hear. It's not the stress itself that kills you. It's the stress you repress. It's the inability to say no, to set boundaries, to recognize and express your emotions without guilt. And I need you to understand one thing. This is not conspiracy theory. It's not alternative talk. It's science. It's direct observation of real life, confirmed by decades of studies. It's the body saying what your mouth didn't have the courage to say. And when the body decides to speak, it doesn't whisper. It shouts. Sometimes in the form of cancer, sometimes of an autoimmune disease, sometimes of a heart attack. Always as a last resort to save you from yourself. You may think you're in control of your life, that you're strong, resilient, that you can handle everything. But the truth is, if you keep living to please others and denying what you feel, your body will do something drastic to force you to stop. And when that moment comes, it may be too late. Today, I want to show you how to recognize this invisible enemy before it wins. Because your body doesn't lie, and if you learn to listen, you can still rewrite your story. Modern medicine prides itself on its technological advancements. Today, it can open your chest, replace a heart valve, and close it back up as if it were a mechanical repair. It can map your DNA, predict genetic predispositions, and bombard tumors with millimeter precision. And indeed, all of this is impressive. But in the midst of this relentless search for objective and measurable answers, it has overlooked a fundamental dimension: the way your emotional life shapes, weakens, or strengthens your body. This is the blind spot that almost no one in the system wants to confront, because it is too uncomfortable for both the doctor and the patient. When someone receives a serious diagnosis, it is common for the first thought to be, "Why me?" And the answer that medicine offers usually rests on three pillars: genetics, bad luck, or external risk factors such as smoking, diet, and pollution. It is a discourse that partially comforts because it takes the weight off your hands. You become a victim of circumstances, not an active participant in creating this situation. However, this narrative has a problem. It ignores something that Gabor Maté, over decades of working with terminal patients, could not help but see. Maté began to notice that it did not matter whether the patient had cancer, multiple sclerosis, severe arthritis, or advanced heart disease. Many of them shared a similar life story. Stories of people who learned early on that to be loved, they needed to be useful, pleasant and harmless. Stories of people who swallowed their own anger to avoid causing problems, who smiled to prevent conflicts, who took on responsibilities that were never theirs. People who, on the outside, seemed strong, altruistic, and resilient, but who, on the inside, carried an emotional burden that never found an outlet. And here is what medicine does not like to admit. These stories are not irrelevant. They do not stay in the head. They infiltrate the body, alter how the immune system functions, disrupt hormonal balance, and keep the organism trapped in a constant state of tension. What starts as an emotional state eventually becomes a chronic physical state. It is like living with your foot on the accelerator all the time. Sooner or later, something will break. The problem is that, to accept this, medicine would have to completely change the way it understands and treats diseases. It would have to stop seeing the patient merely as a set of organs and tests and start seeing them as a whole human being, where mind and body are inseparable. This means more consultation time, more listening, more attention to stories, and less reliance on tests to understand the situation. And, let's be honest, this does not fit into the healthcare model we know today, which values speed, productivity, and standardization. For the patient, accepting this truth is also painful, because it means facing the fact that, in some way, the way they lived contributed to what they are experiencing now. It is not about blame. It is about responsibility. It is about recognizing that ignoring one's own limits and suffocating one's feelings comes at too high a cost. It is easier to believe that everything is the fault of genes than to admit that we spent years betraying ourselves to be accepted. And this is one of the greatest dilemmas. While no one talks about it, you continue to repeat the same pattern, thinking that everyone lives like this, and that it is normal to feel exhausted, anxious, and emotionally drained. But your body is already sensing that something is wrong, and if you pay attention, you will notice that the signs are there, even if subtle. What Gabor Maté discovered is that there is a very specific profile of person who carries this burden with even more intensity, and therefore has a higher chance of becoming seriously ill. In the next part, we will talk about this profile. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You probably know someone like this. And maybe that someone is you, always available, always ready to help, always smiling, even when inside you are crumbling. It's the person everyone describes as too good, selfless, the heart of the family, or the friend who is always there when we need them. It is also the person who, silently, carries a weight that no one sees. And according to Gabor Maté, this weight has direct consequences on physical health. This pattern starts early, almost always in childhood. Perhaps you grew up in an environment where your emotional needs were not a priority, where crying was drama, complaining was lack of gratitude, and showing anger was seen as something ugly or wrong. Children who go through this quickly learn that to be accepted and loved, they need to be pleasant, calm, helpful, and gradually they begin to shape their entire personality around this survival strategy, putting others first, ignoring what they feel, and above all, never causing problems. In adulthood, this transforms into an automatic script. You say yes to everything, even when you are exhausted. You take on responsibilities at work that are not yours because you don't want to disappoint. You endure abusive behaviors from family members or partners because you fear losing the bond if you set boundaries. When something hurts you, you swallow it, pretend it doesn't matter, change the subject. Over time, you don't even realize anymore that you are negating yourself because you have become accustomed to confusing being good with being invisible. And here's the cruelest detail. The body doesn't understand this game. For it, every time you stifle a legitimate emotion, it is registered as an internal threat. The immune system, which should protect against viruses, bacteria, and defective cells, begins to dysregulate. Stress hormones, like cortisol, remain constantly elevated. Silent inflammations settle in and persist. And when this state lasts for years, it opens the door to chronic diseases, cancer, multiple sclerosis, arthritis, heart problems. Maté observed that many people who followed this pattern their whole lives carried serious diagnoses, not because they were unlucky or had a bad fate, but because living to please is biologically unsustainable. The body needs congruence. It needs your emotional life to be honored. When you say, "I'm fine," and you're not, when you stay silent to keep the peace, you create a silent war within yourself. And sooner or later, this war finds a physical battlefield. The most dangerous part of this pattern is that, from the outside, it looks like virtue. Those looking in see someone generous, reliable, admirable. No one sees the invisible cost being paid. And as you have become accustomed to defining yourself by how useful you are to others, changing this behavior seems impossible, because it means altering the foundation of your identity. But if you don't change, the body will do it for you, and in the harshest way possible. And here comes the question that can change everything. What happens when the body decides it can no longer follow the rules of your mind? This is exactly what we will talk about in the next part, when we will see how the body, faced with prolonged silence, finds its own way to say enough. The human body is patient. It endures much more than it should. It tolerates sleepless nights, rushed meals, exhausting days, and swallowed conflicts. But this patience has its limits. And when it realizes that you are not going to change your way of living, that you will continue to ignore signals, suppress emotions, and sacrifice yourself to maintain external harmony, it makes the decision for you. It says, "Enough." And it doesn't whisper. It shouts. This shout rarely comes suddenly. It starts with small, almost imperceptible symptoms: fatigue that you attribute to work, headaches that you justify with too much time on the computer, a tightness in the chest that you call temporary anxiety. But as you are trained to put yourself second, you ignore it all. The body then intensifies the warnings: digestive problems, muscle pain, insomnia crises. You seek a doctor, undergo tests, but often the results come back normal. And this only reinforces the idea that everything is fine, when in fact, it is the opposite. According to Gabor Maté, this is the most dangerous phase, when the body is already suffering, but has not yet manifested something serious enough to draw attention. It's like an alarm ringing in the background that you have learned to ignore. But the body does not give up. It knows that if it doesn't stop you, no one will. And then come the diagnoses that change the course of life: cancer, autoimmune diseases, heart attacks, degenerative conditions. And as hard as it may seem, Maté explains that in many cases, illness is the only way for the body to force the interruption of a destructive pattern. It's as if it says, "Since you can't say no, I will say it for you." For some, this means months of intense treatment. For others, years of living with a chronic condition. And for many, it means a race against time. The most disturbing thing is that, biologically, this makes sense. Repressed emotions do not disappear. They alter fundamental physiological processes. They dysregulate the immune system, inflame tissues, affect hormonal balance. We live thinking we are mind and body separated, but this division is an illusion. When the mind refuses to deal with an emotion, the body takes on the task of processing it. And this burden, accumulated over the years, comes at a high price. Perhaps you know stories like this: people who have always been strong, positive, tireless, who never complained, until suddenly a diagnosis changed everything. And looking back, you realize that the signs were there. small calls for attention that were ignored until the only possible language was that of illness. But here comes the revelation that breaks one of the most accepted myths about health. It is not simply stress that does this. It is not working too much, facing problems, or living through difficult situations. It is something much more specific and at the same time much more dangerous. And it is exactly about this that we will talk in the next part, because understanding this point is fundamental to breaking the cycle that slowly destroys your health. When we talk about stress, almost everyone imagines the same thing: a hectic life, tight deadlines, endless traffic, work pressures, piling bills. And it's true, all of this weighs heavily. But according to Gabor Maté, this is not the type of stress that makes you sick the most. What really corrodes your health is not the stress you feel. It's the stress you don't allow yourself to feel. It's what you hide, disguise, swallow, because you believe you can't, shouldn't, or it's not safe to express. This is where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because many people even accept that a busy life is harmful. This is easy to understand. Work too much and you exhaust yourself, sleep too little, and you weaken. But admitting that the real problem is emotional, that your difficulty in saying no and showing what you feel might be killing you, is another story. It means looking at deeply rooted habits, at beliefs you've carried since childhood. It means realizing that every time you swallow your anger to not create a fuss, every time you hold back tears to not seem weak, every time you say, "It's fine," when it's not fine at all, you are accumulating an invisible poison. Maté observed something that, for many, seems counterintuitive. People who express their emotions healthily, including anger, rarely develop certain serious illnesses. This is because anger, contrary to popular belief, is not just destructive. It is a legitimate biological response to a threat or invasion. It sets boundaries, protects your integrity, preserves your emotional space. When you cut off this response, you are not just repressing a feeling, you're blocking a vital defense mechanism. And don't be fooled, repressing does not mean controlling. Controlling is recognizing what you feel and consciously deciding how to act. Repressing is pretending you don't feel. It's pushing it down, locking it in a drawer, and throwing away the key. Except that this drawer is inside you, and everything that stays there rots. Over time, this creates a constant state of internal tension. Your muscles remain tense, your heart beats faster, your immune system gets confused, your brain stays on alert. And living like this for years is not sustainable. Perhaps you've caught yourself saying things like, "It's not worth fighting over," or "I'd rather avoid conflict." But deep down, you know that every time you do this, you give up a piece of yourself, and your body notices. It notices the inconsistency between what you feel and what you express. It notices that you are betraying yourself, and it doesn't forget. The big lie we tell ourselves is that time heals everything. Time does not heal what you do not face. It merely pushes it deeper until the internal pressure becomes impossible to contain. And that's when illnesses appear, not as enemies, but as desperate messengers trying to make you stop and pay attention. The good news is that there is a way out, but it requires courage to break this cycle, to face old fears, and to make space for a different way of living. And it is about this way out, about how to break the logic that has been making your body sick for years, that we will talk about in the next part. Because if you've made it this far, you already know, continuing the way things are is not a safe option. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. Breaking the cycle is not just about learning a breathing technique or taking a break from work. It is deeper than that. It is about rewriting the way you relate to the world and, most importantly, to yourself. It is a process that starts with something simple, but for many, it seems impossible. Recognizing that your needs are as legitimate as those of others. For most people trapped in this pattern, saying no is almost unthinkable. Not because they don't know the word, but because deep down, there is a nearly childlike fear of rejection. You learned long ago that being accepted depended on pleasing others, being useful, and avoiding conflict. And that lesson became tattooed on your identity. Breaking away from this means facing the possibility of displeasing, disappointing, and even losing connections. That is why, even knowing you are hurting yourself, you continue to repeat the same behavior. The first step is to understand that taking care of yourself is not selfish. It is survival. You cannot keep giving from an empty well. Healthy boundaries do not push away the right people. They only push away those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. And this is where courage comes in. The courage to tolerate the initial discomfort of saying no, to express anger when it is legitimate, to embrace sadness without shame, to speak up when something hurts you. Maté emphasizes that this change is not just emotional, it is physical. By allowing your emotions to exist, you take your body out of a constant state of alert. Your hormones balance, inflammation decreases, and your immune system starts functioning as it should. It is like opening the windows of a house that has been closed for years and letting the air circulate. Of course, it is not an instant process. Just as it took years for you to mold yourself to the pattern that makes you sick, it will take time to rebuild a way of living that supports your health. Part of this reconstruction involves relearning to listen to your body. Instead of ignoring signals, treat them as messages. The fatigue that doesn't go away is not laziness. It is a request for a pause. The tension in your chest is not weakness. It is a warning. The tear that insists on falling is not drama. It is truth wanting to surface. Each of these signals is an opportunity to change course before it is too late. But be aware, breaking this cycle requires consistency. A single decision or a moment of courage is not enough. It is a daily commitment to your own integrity. And yes, there will be setbacks. Moments when you will go back to saying yes to avoid discomfort. The difference is that now you will know the cost of that yes. And that knowledge changes everything. Because when you understand that saying no can save your life, each boundary set ceases to be an act of rebellion and becomes an act of radical self-care. And it is precisely this urgency, this awareness that the body does not wait indefinitely, that leads us to the last part of this conversation. Because in the end, the question remains, will you listen to your body now while there is still time? Or will you wait until it screams so loudly that it becomes impossible to turn back? Your body doesn't lie. It never has. Since the first signs, that strange fatigue, the unexplained pains, the anxiety that arises out of nowhere, it has been trying to get your attention. But we have a dangerous ability to ignore the obvious. And when we do that for too long, the body loses patience. It doesn't care about your schedule, your fear of displeasing, or the expectations others have of you. The body has one goal, to preserve your life. And if it needs to force you to stop, it will. Gabor Maté showed us something that many prefer not to see. Illness, in many cases, is the last card the body plays to save you from yourself. It is not an enemy, it is a messenger. A messenger that arrives late, tired of repeating warnings you didn't hear. The problem is that when it finally speaks loud enough for you to listen, the message may come accompanied by a diagnosis that changes everything. You can choose not to believe it. You can say it's an exaggeration, that it's just stress, that everyone lives like this. But deep down, you know it's not quite like that. You feel, in the silence of the night, that something is not right. You feel that you are living on the edge, pushing yourself beyond what you should, pretending that everything is fine when in fact, it is not. And it is at this moment that you need to decide. Will you wait for the body to scream louder? Or will you listen now, while there is still time to change course? The truth is that no one can make this choice for you. No doctor, no therapist, no video. But I can remind you that every limit you set, every time you choose to honor what you feel, every no that comes out of your mouth when something hurts you, all of this is a direct investment in your health and your life. The body responds. It feels when you start to live in alignment with who you truly are. And in that alignment, there is strength, there is healing, there is possibility. Now I want to hear from you. What was the moment when your body tried to warn you that something was wrong? Did you ignore it, or did you listen? Share in the comments. Your experience could open someone's eyes who needs to hear this today. If this video made sense to you, the next one is just as important. It will delve even deeper into this conversation and may be the missing piece for you to understand what is happening within yourself. So keep watching. I'll see you there.